Zheng Chenggong, better known in the West by his Hokkien honorific Koxinga, Coxinga, was a Chinese-Japanese Ming loyalist who resisted the Qing conquest of China's southeastern coast. Conquering the Dutch outposts on Taiwan, he established a dynasty which ruled the island as a Kingdom of Tungning. Life. Early years. Zheng Sen was born in 1624 in Hirado, Nagasaki Prefecture, Japan, to Zheng Chenggong, a Chinese merchant and pirate, and a Japanese woman, recorded only by her surname Tagawa, or probably Tagawa Matsu. He was raised there until the age of 7 with the Japanese name Fuku Matsu, and then moved to Nan'an County in Quanzhou in Fujian Province of China. In 1638, Coxinga became a Zhoukai in the imperial examination and became one of the 12 Linsheng of Nan'an. In 1641, Coxinga married the niece of Dong Yangxian, an official who was a Jinshi from Huian. In 1644, Coxinga studied at the Imperial Nanking University, where he met and became a student of the scholar Qian Qiani. In 1644, Beijing fell to rebels led by Li Zicheng, and the Chongzhen Emperor hanged himself on a tree at modern-day Jingshan Park in Beijing. Manchu armies aided by Wu Sangui's forces defeated the rebels and took the city. The Ming remnant forces retreated to Nanjing, where the Prince Fu ascended to the throne as the Hongguang Emperor. The next year, the Manchu armies led by Dodo advanced south and conquered Jiangzhou and Nanjing, while the Ming leader defending Yangzhou, Shikefa, was killed. The Hongguang Emperor was captured and executed. Under the Long Wu Emperor, in 1645, Prince Tang was installed on the throne as the Long Wu Emperor with support from Zheng Chenggong and his family. The Long Wu Emperor established his court in Fuzhou, which was controlled by the Zhengs. In the later part of the year, another Ming Prince Lu proclaimed himself as regent in Shaoxing and established his own court there. Although Prince Lu and Long Wu's regime stemmed from the same dynasty, both of them pursued different goals. It was due to the natural defenses of Fujian and the military resources of the Zheng family that the emperor was able to remain safe for some time. The Long Wu Emperor granted Zheng Chenggong's son, Zheng Sen, a new personal name, Chenggong, and the title of Coxinga. In 1646, Coxinga first led the Ming armies to resist the Manchu invaders and won the favor of the Long Wu Emperor. The Long Wu Emperor's reign in Fuzhou was brief, as Zheng Chenggong refused to support his plans for a counter-offensive against the rapidly expanding forces of the newly established Qing Dynasty by the Manchus. Zheng Chenggong ordered the defending general of Xiangxia Pass, Shifu, to retreat to Fuzhou even when Qing armies approached Fujian. As such, the Qing army faced little resistance when it conquered the north of the pass. In September 1646, Qing armies broke through inadequately defended mountain passes and entered Fujian. Zheng Chenggong retreated to his coastal fortress and the Long Wu Emperor faced the Qing armies alone. Long Wu's forces were destroyed and he was captured and died shortly afterwards. Zheng Chenggong's surrender and the death of Tagawa. The Qing forces sent envoys to meet Zheng Chenggong secretly, and they offered to appoint him as the governor of both Fujian and Guangdong provinces if he would surrender to Qing. Zheng Chenggong agreed and ignored the objections of his family, surrendering himself to the Qing forces in Fuzhou on the 21st of November 1646. Koxinga and his uncles were left as the successors to the leadership of Zheng Chenggong's military forces. Koxinga operated outside Xiamen and recruited many to join his cause in a few months. He used the superiority of his naval forces to launch amphibious raids on Manchu-occupied territory in Fujian, and he managed to take Tong'an in Quanzhou Prefecture in early 1647. However, Koxinga's forces lacked the ability to defend the newly occupied territory. Following the fall of Tongan to Zheng, the Manchus launched a counterattack in the spring of 1647, during which they stormed the Zheng family's hometown of Anping. Koxinga's mother, Lady Togawa, had come from Japan in 1645 to join her family in Hokkien. She did not follow her husband to surrender to the Qing Dynasty. She was caught by Manchu forces in Anping and committed suicide after refusal to submit to the enemy. According to traditional accounts, resistance to the king by 1650, Koxinga was strong enough to establish himself as the head of the Zheng family. He pledged allegiance to the only remaining claimant to the throne of the Ming dynasty, the Yongle Emperor. The Yongle Emperor was fleeing from the Manchus in southwestern China with a motley court and hastily assembled army at the time. Despite one fruitless attempt, Koxinga was unable to do anything to aid the last Ming emperor. Instead, he decided to concentrate on securing his own position on the southeast coast. Koxinga enjoyed a series of military successes in 1651 and 1652 that increased the Qing government's anxiety over the threat he posed. The fight carried out massacre in Zhangzhou. Zheng Chenggong wrote a letter to his son from Beijing, presumably at the request of the Shunshi Emperor and the Qing government, urging his son to negotiate with the Manchurians. The long series of negotiations between Koxinga and the Qing dynasty lasted until November 1654. The Qing government appointed Prince Jidu to lead an attack on Koxinga's territory after the failed negotiations. On the 9th of May 1656, Jidu's armies attacked Jinmen, an island near Xiamen that Koxinga had been using to train his troops. Partly as a result of a major storm, the Manchus were defeated and they lost most of the fleet in the battle. Koxinga had sent one of his naval commanders to capture Zushan Island prior to Jidu's attack, and now that the Manchus were temporarily without an effective naval force in the Hokkien area, Koxinga was free to send a huge army to Zushan, which he intended to use as a base to capture Nanjing. Koxinga's Ming loyalists fought against a majority Han Chinese Bannerman Qing army when attacking Nanjing. On Taiwan in 1661, Koxinga led his troops on a landing at Lac Gemise to attack the Dutch colonists in Dutch Formosa. The Taiwanese Aboriginal tribes who were previously allied with the Dutch against the Chinese during the Guo Wai Rebellion in 1652 turned against the Dutch during the siege of Fort Zeelandia and defected to Koxinga's Chinese forces. The Aboriginals of Sincan defected to Koxinga after he offered them amnesty. The Sincan Aboriginals then proceeded to work for the Chinese and behead Dutch people in executions. The frontier Aboriginals in the mountains and plains also surrendered and defected to the Chinese on May 17, 1661, celebrating the freedom from compulsory education under the Dutch rule by hunting down Dutch people and beheading them and trashing their Christian school textbooks. On the 1st of February 1662, the Dutch governor of Formosa, Frederick Coët, surrendered Fort Zeelandia to Koxinga, according to Frederick Coët's account written after the siege to absolve himself of the Dutch defeat. During the siege, Koxinga's life was saved by a certain Hans Jurgen Radies of Stockett, a Dutch defector who strongly advised him against visiting the overrun ramparts, which he knew would be blown up by the retreating Dutch forces. This claim of a Dutch defector only appears in Coët's account, and Chinese records make no such mention of any defector. In the peace treaty, Koxinga was styled Lord Tabing Sante Tejan Con Coxin. This effectively ended 38 years of Dutch rule on Taiwan. Koxinga then devoted himself to transforming Taiwan into a military base for loyalists who wanted to restore the Ming dynasty. in the Philippines. In 1662, Koxinga's forces raided several towns in the Philippines. Koxinga's chief advisor was an Italian friar named Vittorio Riccio, whom he sent to Manila to demand tribute from the colonial government of the Spanish East Indies, threatening to attack the city if his demands were not met. The Spanish refused to pay the tribute and reinforced the garrisons around Manila, but the planned attack never took place due to Koxinga's sudden death in that year after expelling the Dutch on Taiwan. Koxinga's threat to invade the islands and expel the Spanish eventually caused the Spanish failure to conquer the Muslim Moro people in Mindanao. The threat of Chinese invasion forced the Spanish to withdraw the forces to Manila, leaving some troops in Jolo and by Lake Lanao to engage the Moro in protracted conflict, while Zamboanga in Mindanao was immediately evacuated upon Koxinga's threats. The Spanish were also forced to abandon their colony in the Maluku Islands and withdraw the soldiers to Manila. Antonio Andrade judged that Koxinga would most likely have been able to defeat the Spanish. There, Koxinga died of malaria at the age of 37. There were speculations that he died in a sudden fit of madness when his officers refused to carry out his orders to execute his son Zheng Jing. Zheng Jing had had an affair with his wet nurse and conceived a child with her. Zheng Jing succeeded his father as the king of Tungning family. Zheng Chenggong's short but eventful career was characterized by family tension and conflicting loyalties. The title of Koxinga was one that Zheng himself used during his lifetime to emphasize his status as an adopted son of the deposed imperial house, and hence it was also a declaration of ongoing support to the Ming dynasty. Despite his deliberate self-identification as the noble, loyal vassal of a vanquished master, Koxinga's actual relationship with the Longwu emperor lasted only 12 months or so, beginning in September 1645 and ending with the emperor's death the following year. Although many secondary sources claim that the two men shared a close bond of affection, there is an absence of any reliable contemporary evidence on Koxinga's relationship with the Longwu emperor. In contrast, Koxinga's father Zheng Zhilong left his Japanese wife not long after the birth of his son. Koxinga would be a boy of 7 when he finally joined his father on the Fujianese coast, and it seems that Zheng Zhilong recognized his son's talent and encouraged him in his studies and the pursuit of a career as a scholar official, which would legitimize the power the Zheng family had acquired using sometimes questionable means. Zheng Zhilong's defection to the king must have seemed opportunistic and in stark contrast to Koxinga's continued loyalty to the Ming, but it is difficult to deny that in refusing to submit to the king, Koxinga was risking the life of his father, and that the subsequent death of Zheng Zhilong could only be justified by claiming loyalty to the Ming. It has even been suggested that Koxinga's fury at the incestuous relationship between his son, Zheng Jing, and a younger son's wet nurse was due to the fact that strict Confucian morality had played such a crucial role in justifying his lack of filial behavior. The one possible exception to this may have been his relationship with his mother, which has generally been described as being extremely affectionate, particularly in Chinese and Japanese sources. Their time together, however, was apparently very short, despite frequent entreaties from Zheng Zhilong for her to join him in China. Koxinga's mother would only be reunited with her son sometime in 1645, and a year later she would be killed when the king took Xiamen. A portrait of Zheng was in the hands of Yukon, who was his descendant in the 8th generation concubine during the siege of Fort Zeelandia. Koxinga executed Dutch missionary Antonius Hambroek and took his teenage daughter as a concubine. Other Dutch women were sold to Chinese soldiers to become the wives. In 1684 some of these Dutch wives were still captives of the Chinese family tree. Queen Tang, who had no son, was King Zheng Chenggong's Shitsu. Modern-day legacy and influences. Coxinga's legacy is treated differently on each side of the Taiwan Strait. Coxinga is worshipped as a god in coastal China, especially Hokkien, by overseas Chinese in Southeast Asia and in Taiwan. There is a temple dedicated to Coxinga and his mother in Tainan City, Taiwan. The National Chengkang University in Tainan, one of the most prestigious universities in Taiwan, is named after him. Coxinga's army also brought the Qinshi Fraternal Brotherhood into Taiwan, of which some of his army were members of the organization. In the present day, the Qinshi currently exists in Taiwan. The Hongmen are associated with them. The play The Battles of Coxinga was written by Chikamatsu Monzimon in Japan in the 18th century, first performed in Kyoto. A 2001 film titled The Sino-Dutch War 1661 starred Vincent Zhao as Coxinga. The film was renamed Koxinga after the aforementioned play and released in Japan in 2002. Coxinga has received renewed attention since rumors began circulating that the People's Liberation Army Navy were planning to name the newly acquired aircraft carrier the ex-Soviet Varyag, the Shilang. Admiral Shilang famously defeated Coxinga's descendants in the 1683 Battle of Penghu, thus bringing Taiwan under Qing rule. However, the Chinese government denied all allegations that the vessel would be dedicated to the decorated Qing Dynasty admiral. Coxinga is regarded as a hero in the People's Republic of China, Taiwan, and Japan. But historical narratives regarding Coxinga frequently differ in explaining his motives and affiliation. Japan treats him as a native son and emphasized his maternal link to Japan in propaganda during the Japanese occupation of Taiwan. The People's Republic of China considers Coxinga a national hero for driving the imperialist Dutch away from Taiwan and establishing ethnic Chinese rule over the island. On mainland China, Coxinga is honored as the conqueror of Taiwan, great rebel quelling general, a military hero who brought Taiwan back within the Han Chinese sphere of influence through expanded economic, trade and cultural exchanges. In China, Coxinga is honored without the religious overtones found in Taiwan. The Republic of China, which withdrew to Taiwan after losing the Chinese Civil War, regards Coxinga as a patriot who also retreated to Taiwan and used it as a base to launch counterattacks against the Qing Dynasty of mainland China. In Taiwan, Coxinga is honored as the island's most respected saint for expelling the Dutch and seen as the original ancestor of a free Taiwan, and is known as Zheng Chenggong, or the Sage King who opened up Taiwan, and as the Yanping Prince, referring to the Kingdom of Tungning, which he established in modern-day Tainan. In Taiwan, Coxinga is remembered and revered as a divine national hero with hundreds of temples, schools, tertiary educations, and other public centers named in his honor. Coxinga is accredited with replacing Dutch colonial rule with a more modern political system. Furthermore, Coxinga transformed Taiwan into an agrarian society through the introduction of new agricultural methods such as the proliferation of iron farming tools and new farming methods with cattle. For these reasons, Coxinga is often associated with hints of consciousness of Taiwanese independence. However, not all Taiwanese accept the popularized interpretation of the Coxinga legacy. Supporters of Taiwanese independence are skeptical about embracing the Coxinga legacy. Coxinga's mixed Japanese heritage and the positive connotations in mainland China have all made acceptance by Taiwan independence supporters problematic. In mainland China, Koxinga is considered a positive historical but human figure. Koxinga's retreat to Taiwan is seen largely as an inspirational story of Chinese nationalists seeking refuge against hostile forces. Koxinga's aspirations to see Taiwan united with the mainland is often accentuated. Furthermore, Koxinga facilitated the settlement of a large number of Han Chinese to Taiwan who brought with them the Han cultures, traditions, and languages. As a direct result, Han Chinese make up approximately 98% of the Taiwanese population today. Memorial institutions. There are hundreds of public pieces, shrines dedicated to and worship Koxinga. The Koxinga Temple in Tainan City, Taiwan, is perhaps the most interesting as it is the only Fujianese-style shrine in Taiwan. Quote, "The temple illustrates the geographic connection between Taiwan and the mainland, describe the evolution of life from the past to the present, which means that the temple acknowledges that Koxinga is a legacy shared by both Taiwan and the mainland and that this perhaps is still important today." In mainland China, however, there is only one official memorial to the conqueror of Taiwan, and that is on Gulang Island of Xiamen, Hokkien Province, which is positioned directly across Taiwan's Kinmen. The imposing statue of Zheng Chenggong in full military regalia gazes over the water facing Taiwan, whilst the statue of Zheng portrays a clean-shaven young general in armor. Taiwan, Koxinga seldom appears as a warrior. His portraits show him as a Ming noble in civilian robes, and wearing a small beard, a symbol of seniority and sobriety. Quote, "This difference in commemoration of the Koxinga story illustrates the wide difference in attitudes on either side of the Taiwan Strait on the issue of Taiwan sovereignty." National Chengkung University, Chengkung Senior High School, Chengkung Class Frigate, Chenggong, Taitung.